Do I look like I'm in my pajamas? All right, so today what I thought we'd talk about is really it's just answering a question that a lot of people have. We get this question a lot online, which is how much pressure should be on my hands when I'm cornering? Do I pressure my inside hand? Do I pressure my outside hand? What's going on here? Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to just check in a couple different scenarios. The first is going to be a little bit of a berm turn. Here we've got a couple nice flowy turns coming through. Then we're going to take a look at one of our favorite places to do drill training, which is the off-camber space that we have. So we're going to head over there as well and take a look. And what we're actually going to see today is that we don't really need to try to manifest a lot of hand pressure. But then when we're in an off-camber turn, it's going to look like there's a lot more just because of the way our body is moving. So we're going to talk about the movements that we want to have into these turns, how we actually get pressure over the front of the bicycle, and how berm turns are very slightly different in this respect than off-camber turns.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do it.
Okay. So one of the major deals with not needing to get a lot of weight on the hands for cornering is our position, right? Having our knee move over the ball of the foot is critical because as that starts to happen, we start to get even weight down through the bottom bracket, and that even weight through the bottom bracket distributes evenly over both tires and over both ends of the suspension. So it's basically the driving of the knee forward, the outside knee forward, the pressuring leg when I'm in a turn, that's starting to distribute that weight and starting to drive it forward into the fork. And so what we're actually going to be able to see here in slow motion in these turns is even without creating a lot of hand pressure coming through here, that the front fork is going to be doing a lot of work. So we're going to see that the front fork is really diving down here, and that's because our outside knee is driving forward. We're just going to show that quickly with a little bit of a standing demo here. So I'm just going to stand, press up and down through both legs with a proper stance. Then I'm going to bring my knees back a little, and you can really see how this affects the outcome of the front suspension in particular. So as I drive the outside knee forward through that turn, the outside elbow raises and it looks like I'm pressing down a lot, but really there's not a lot of weight on my upper body at all. My shoulders are just now starting to point in the direction I want to go. The weight that's down through my bike and through my suspension is actually happening from that outside knee driving forward. And we can actually see here the result of my suspension. So the first time through, using a little bit over half the travel. As I start to push harder through that turn, we might see maybe a little more travel used. We'll give that a shot on the next lap. Let's do this. For objective proof of the compression that we're getting in our forks, we're going to basically be coming through this turn without thinking about consciously pressuring the arm at all, so just moving through in a good position. And we're going to reset our little travel indicators here.
Okay.
So that we can see how much front fork compression we're getting simply from driving through at that outside knee.
Okay. Before we started this whole thing, I had no idea how much more fun riding was going to be once I invested in my skills. Let's face it, crashing really isn't that much fun, but being able to control your risk and have a plan for every situation has made all the difference. If you're serious about improving your riding, check out our online school at fluidrideonline.com.
We both used quite a bit of our front travel in that last turn. We both use like 60% of our front travel in that nice supported turn. So now we're going to get into this off-camber turn that we're standing in. It's one that everybody's familiar with. We use this one a lot. But the reason we want to show the off-camber is obviously in an off-camber, there's less pressure to press against, right? Like in a berm, I've got something to push into. So that makes sense that we could create some fork compression. Here in the off-camber, just as a quick reminder, we're going to be bringing the outside hip up and around and getting that pressure to press in hill, pressing toward the part of the tire that's going to be on the ground. So as we do this, as we make this rotation, that outside knee is driving forward and slightly in, and that's going to be creating a situation where we create good compression down through the front fork without even pushing with the arms. Okay, so it's not that we're trying not to push with the arms, it's that we don't really need to push with the arms. And as we've talked about, if we're really making a nice transition into our footwork and our hip rotation and pressuring down through the bike as we get into this turn, the outside leg is going to be responsible for most of the compression in the front fork.
So we know that a lot of people do use inside hand pressure in turns like this.
Or a lot of people talk about it. And you know, the thing about mountain biking that it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it's so technically diverse, like the shapes and angles of pressure, everything's constantly changing. So I'm not saying that there's no time that there's weight in my outside hand. Whether it's my outside hand or my inside hand, I'm not saying that there's no time that there's any weight there, but that's not where my conscious thought is going. Like I'm not coming into the turn and thinking I need to set pressure on the front wheel. Remember, we're getting pressure on the front wheel by driving the outside knee forward. We can see that because we're getting compression through the fork, getting compression down through the tire, so we're able to get a lot of traction. And the cool thing about this is, when this traction is moving through my feet, like when it's moving as my outside foot is rotating down, my center of mass is getting very, very low down here. So my center of mass is all the way down here. So that's very different than thinking about coming in and pressing up here. Like, my bike is actually sitting on roots right now. If I'm pressing a lot of weight up here, I'm much more likely to be able to slide the front end than if I'm pressing weight down low.
Right.
So we want this weight to manifest from low. We want to keep a low center of mass and keep the upper body relatively relaxed so that it can actually rotate through the turn. One of my favorite things that I haven't seen in a while that I miss is watching Jason Gainey come through here during class. And he'll come through and he'll like point at everybody on one side, point at everybody on the other side while he's ripping through an off-camber with his hips all rotated. So he's just showing that there's really like no weight on the hands as he comes through. Now, I'm not willing to do that demonstration, but let's demonstrate for everyone how we can get through this turn with a lot of speed, a lot of ease, and a lot of front fork compression without a lot of weight in the hands. Before we take off and do our off-camber turns, let's just reset our forks. So reset our little travel measurers. And
Travel measurers?
Measurers. Yeah, we're going to measure our use of front travel in an off-camber turn right now. Tracking through that turn, the dirt's pretty nice today. Getting a lot of pressure down through there. I was using about the same amount of travel you're using.
I used a lot of travel.
I can tell. I can tell. We got to really get up into that front end of the bike, right? So here, really important that we're getting the front end to track. So a couple things happening, a lot of that we get questions about, which is, if we don't push with the hand, how do we get bike body separation? And we have a whole video dedicated to this, but essentially you're letting the bike start to tip into the turn. And then as the bike starts to tip into the turn, that's when you start your footwork and the hips are coming around. So we can get our bike body separation without this. We can get a lot of pressure into the front tire without this, a lot of pressure into the front fork without a lot of hand pressure, right?
Yeah.
So not thinking super literally about it.
Okay, so really quick though. So we talked about if you have too much weight or extra weight in your outside hand, then that's not optimal because you can get better traction putting that weight through your outside foot. What's the downside of having weight on your inside hand?
So there's not a lot of downside to getting some weight on your handlebars, honestly. Like it wouldn't be a huge deal. The thing about it is if I'm pulling down here, I'm not very dynamic. I can't move very dynamically. And so I prefer my weight to be down low in my body. So the downside would be that I'm not able to like transfer my weight and rotate quite as seamlessly if I'm putting a lot of muscular pressure into my arms. Because obviously if I'm pulling down here, I can't rotate laterally. Whereas if I'm pressing down through my legs, I'm still really free to rotate. And that brings up another interesting thing. As we're moving through this turn, as that outside foot is driving down and the outside knee is driving forward, that's changing the relationship of my arm relative to my handlebar. So as that's happening, that as I drive forward, that outside knee and I create compression on the front fork and on the front tire, that allows the outside elbow to sweep up and raise through the turn. And this is another place where I think we get this idea in coaching where we'll get these questions of like, it really looks like that upper arm is up and it's pressing down. But in reality, it's just swept forward because the knee is driven forward and the whole front side body can now rotate in the direction I want to go. So it's really less about creating pressure and it's more just kind of a result of the other movements that I'm making.
Right. So high level also, we're in the pursuit of riding smooth and effortlessly and maximizing traction without putting in extra energy.
That's exactly it. I mean, we want to be efficient and we want to be calm and we want to kind of maintain this nice low center of mass. And we don't want to be thinking too just kind of like mechanically about come in and push the arm. We want to be coming in and we want to be dynamic. We want to be able to rotate freely. We want to maintain athleticism more than we want to maintain strength on the bike.
Right.
You know, and that's really our strength is the strength of movement, not the strength of like a particular press, power, push, pull, or something like that, right?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So I mean, that's why you see the best riders in the world. They look so loose on the bike. You know, they're moving just so freely over it.
Because they are.
Because they are.
They look that way because they are.
Because they are, yeah. And that's why they can do interviews at the bottom of downhill World Cup runs and not barely be out of breath because they're so relaxed when they're riding.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's been really interesting.
Nice job.